Here we have a Midsize 570 Ranger. I'm going to be showing you how to install a windshield wiper kit. This particular one is a 2017. However, any midsize unit, ETX 500, 570, 2015 and on, this kit will also fit. And it goes under the hood. This particular one is a bottom mounted kit, so it'll be going right at the bottom corner of the windshield there. And I had a previous video where we showed to put a heater in the same model, and I'll get into that there. If you don't have power ran, you need to get power ran from the battery up to that terminal bus, and I'm not going to show it again in this video because I've already done it on this particular machine. But if you want to see how to do that, hop on over to the video on my channel where I show how to put a heater in a midsize, and there's a section of the video that shows the routing of the electrical wiring. I should have clarified at the beginning that this is the Polaris OEM wiper kit. It does include a washer and washer tank, which many universal wipers do not have. This is kit part number 2879968. Basically what we have in the box is instructions, which I still always recommend you paging through. Couple brackets for mounting washer tank, wiper motor, wiper arm, blade, couple of switches, some hardware, couple fittings, and then the harnesses for hooking up the tank and the wiper motor to the dash switches. At this point we'll probably be opening up the hood and seeing where everything lays out. First step they want you to do is to remove the windshield if you have one in there, or if you have a tip-out windshield in there, just flipping it up, because the dash cap does need to be removed in a couple steps. Right now though, there's a bracket that looks like this. Needs to bolt into place where those two upper bolt holes are. It will look, something like that when it's done. And then that just takes the two 10mm head M6 bolts, self-tappers, just slam them in there. Once that's mounted, we mount the washer tank, and that is going to bolt to the bracket once the bracket is installed. So we can go ahead and install the bracket and install this and proceed with the next step. Here I got the washer tank mounted on the bracket. There's also a relocation plug for the diagnostic port, which wasn't in the way on this particular model but may be on certain models. I have also taken the rivets out of this top cap so that it's completely loose. Polaris recommends removing it completely, but I'm going to try to do it somewhat installed because I don't want to have to change the ducting for the heating. So at this point we're going to drill out the holes 18mm and 5/16 and mount the bracket for the wiper motor kind of underneath where that duct is right now. I got the holes drilled out. Just use a step bit. You can see how the metal plate behind there lines up with the hole. This is actually going to be the hole for the washer nipple, and then the other mounting hole for the wiper is right there. You can see I got the two gold colored bolts in there tightened down. It is possible to do without taking off the top cover. It certainly would have been a little bit easier had I taken it off, but I would have had a lot more time messing with them heat ducts I didn't want to mess with. Now we're going to slide the wiper motor in from the back. Obviously we got the big shaft going through the big hole, and then the smaller plate here is what bolts up to that hole right there. Here's a scenario that many of you might run into, being that this machine has a lot of accessories on it already. I ran out of places to put the switches. So this customer already has a couple light bars mounted in the two positions they want us to put the buttons for the washer. One thing Polaris does not do very well is make extra spots for that. So I talked to the customer. What we're actually going to do is cut out the rectangles right here. It's really the only feasible spot on the dash, and put them right there. In order to do so, I'm going to have to elongate the wiring harness so that I can reach the washer with the one end and reach the plug-ins with the other. This is the electrical I was talking about earlier. If you don't have anything on the machine, you're not going to have these big heavy cables. You're going to need some form of power up at this point. The machine comes with this little orange wire, which is enough to power a wiper, but it's not a bad idea to have the big heavy cables ran right from the battery, so you got full access of power up here. And we will be installing the wiper harness to this 3 posts right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the harness ran and augmented so I can get it to work with the new switch placement. You can see I already have the wiper partially installed. I got the mount bolt down there and the main wiper motor shaft coming out the front, and then that hole right there is going to be for the washer. So I'm going to get the harness adjusted, and I'm going to actually have to cut out those holes with the utility knife, which is going to be kind of tedious, but really the only way we can do it at this point. So here's an update on the situation I ran into. I had no room in the main dash to put my buttons, so I went over here, I cut them out of the plastic, which actually they're going to fit in there pretty good. I wanted to go vertical with them, and I needed to get them to go as low as possible because of the heat duct behind there. I didn't want to run into any unnecessary issues with that heat duct in there, poking holes in it and such. I have to wire this, or run the wiring harness different than the instructions show. So here we have your 3 powers. The orange wire goes to the key on ignition switch, the brown wire goes to the battery ground, the red wire goes to the battery positive, and then I'm just going to have to zip tie off a couple of these spots because I'm not able to use the holes to put them little Christmas tree plugs in as I need. I got the main wiper plug. Looks like a circuit breaker, and then here's my 2 switches. One thing I will have to modify is the windshield washer wiper motor power. I'm about, I don't know, 2 feet short at this point because I had to move the switches. I'm going to cut this, butt splice in, and use some good solder connections, add some length to this, re-tape it up so that I can stretch over there, and then at that point I should be pretty much ready to start running the water hose and hooking up the blade. If you do not run into that issue with the dash, just wire it like it shows in the instructions. It's pretty basic. Everything gets held together well. You don't really need to use zip ties, although you can really run the wiring however you want, as long as it's secured. There's nothing in here that's moving that's going to damage anything. So I'll get this wiring harness finished up, show you what it looks like when I'm done, because I'm assuming a lot of people are going to run into the same problem, and we'll continue on. Here's my wire extension, a couple butt splices, shrink wrapped, and then I'm going to tape the whole length, cut it to fit, do the same thing on the other side. Here's the extended wiring harness. Now I will be able to stretch over to the washer tank, route it along the rail, and then at this point we can start zip tying things down, although I will probably run the hose before I start running all my zip ties. Once we hook up the hose and the electrical harness to the washer, we need to route the hose to behind this hole here. I'll put that fitting in there and we'll get that hose all fitted up. Here I have the wiring harness fully installed. Like I said, I had to modify it to get it to work. You may not have to do that. I got the electrical and the water line zip tied along the frame. Electrical continues on. Water line goes up to the fitting. I have it hooked up in the back. And then here's part of the electrical right here, zip tied out of the way. Again, plugged in and screwed down to the electrical bus there. There's my switches. Not a bad idea to test them at this point. Just do a quick dry run. So here's your washer. You should be able to hear the motor. And then low and high speed, you should be able to see the shaft turn. I went ahead and put my darts back in the dash cap, and everything is fully seated now. I'm going to put the windshield on, and then we're going to bolt down the blade and hook up the blade washer hose up to that nipple there, and at that point we'll be close to done. Couple things to consider when you're mounting the blade. Don't have it too low, otherwise you're not going to be able to close your hood. Don't have it too high, otherwise I think the blade is going to be a distraction for the driver if it's, you know, sitting too high up in the windshield. So, you know, those little kind of dots on the windshield are actually a pretty good marker if you can kind of line them up parallel with that. And then go ahead and tighten this nut down to hook the blade up. If you do hook it up and you just don't like where it's at, you can pop it off. It is kind of difficult. You got to loosen the nut and then almost get behind with a pry bar to get it loose off, because it's kind of like a tapered fitting, so it kind of locks on. And then just trim this hose to fit. I mean, leave a little slack so it's not going to get tight. Like I said, do a dry run to make sure that you might need an extra inch or two of slack, but you'll probably have to cut it right around here, get it to fit on that nipple, and then tuck it away. Here I've got everything hooked up. I've tested it, as you can see. The hose is ran for the washer. The washer is this little fitting right on the blade. I got fluid in my tank. You can see when we test it out, we got the high and low, and then the washer, you just hold that down anytime you want fluid. And it actually works pretty good. I mean, the fluid kind of gets all over the place, but you kind of got to expect that that's going to happen. Only other thing I should note is when you close the hood, you will kind of have to finesse it under the wiper blade a little bit, and then also make sure it doesn't pinch the hose. So usually you got to take your finger and pull on the hose a little bit, so that it doesn't get pinched underneath the hood. I suppose I probably could have trimmed it a little shorter, but I like the little extra length because when the blade rotates, it actually pulls on the hose a little bit. So that's it. I mean, it actually looks pretty good. As you drive, sometimes the wiper blade will lower itself, you know, half an inch or so and kind of get below that line just from bouncing around. Sometimes when it stops, just from the motor itself, it stops right up about there, so it'll kind of lower on itself if it's hanging up too high. But pretty easy install. I mean, this one was a little harder than probably the traditional one because we had to put the switches in a different location. One thing I will note, always test your other electronics anytime you've been working on any of the electrical system. Got a couple light bar switches and then the heater. Make sure nothing accidentally got left unplugged. But yeah, that's about it. Any comments, questions, feel free to leave them in the section. Please subscribe, as I got a lot of these videos coming. And thanks for watching.